So we're going to start with the lovely Emily Hunt, who is going to share with us her years of experience and talent and inspiration. I've seen her face so much on the slides and in public, and now it's so lovely to see you in person here, and I'm really looking forward to what you have to share with us tonight, as I'm sure we all are. And then, as Elliot said, we'll move on to a group activity before heading over to Members Corner. So we have some of our members on the programme tonight. We're also going to be sharing how they're using their voice for good in their business. How does that sound?
Yes.
Yes, awesome. Great, so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Emily Hunt.
Wow, lots of new faces for me. I'm used to a bunch of Speaker Express people who are all very different from you, so this is good. New story for everyone. All right, so, that way, okay. Much like Elliot gave you his hashtags and such, if you want to follow me or you want to follow along as we go this evening, feel free to hashtag things Powers for Good or Speak Up for Change. I'm on Instagram, The Real Emily in Public, and I'm on Twitter, Emily in Public. Just the clear, important housekeeping things first. Obviously, we can't go anywhere without the social media. So Elliot asked earlier who was new to Speaker Express, but I was sitting over there so I couldn't see. So can I see hands for who this is the first club night for? All right, awesome. And who is signed up to do a 1 minute today? Signed up to do? Okay. So it seems like a random day for you, I'm sure, but October 18th, 2017, I was sitting in my very first club night at Speaker Express, and I was supposed to be doing a 1 minute, and I was super stressed out. And I put like a little poll on Facebook on what I should talk about, and the topic was parenting advice from my daughter. So I'm running through my head about what I could say and not seem like a total idiot saying. And I'm sitting there, and Anique looks at me and she goes, "You, 5 minutes. Next." And I went, okay. So when Elliot says you don't have to talk, he's lying. So then what happened? I stood on a stage and I told my story in public for the first time ever. And I was vulnerable and afraid, and the room was completely silent. Everyone did that thing where they leaned forward a little bit. And I was just standing up there talking about the worst thing that had ever happened to me and what I wanted to do next. And at the end of it, I went and I sat down and I was shaking. Whenever I'm done speaking, my knees shake like nothing else. So when I sit down after this, I'm going to be sitting shaking. And afterwards, everyone came up to me and they asked me what they could do to help. They asked me what my website was. They asked where my mailing list was. And I was just sort of like, I didn't know I was doing this. I'm going to have to get back to you. But it was absolutely amazing because at the end of the day, it was just this moment where Anique said, "Do you want to get on stage?" And Speaker Express always says the answer to that is always, of course. And I proved it. So my name is Emily Hunt. I am currently a partner at Park Street Partners. I'm a behavior-led strategy, communications, and brand specialist. I have worked for everyone from Apple to Unilever. I've worked for a head of state, a legislature, a royal family, and the right side of an armed rebellion, none of which were in this country, particularly the armed rebellion, especially if anyone's asking. I am also an award-winning public speaker. I'm a successful fundraiser. I am trying to change the world. And I'm also a single mom. But what we're here about today are these two things. My crowdfunding success, having gone from standing up on a stage without so much as a website behind me or any idea of what I was going to do, to raising £27,000 and being on, okay, I've been in every newspaper except The Guardian, and I've not been on Channel 4. That list is a lot shorter. So what did I do? Well, about 4 years ago, I was out to lunch with my dad. We were having this really weird conversation, and then everything went blank. completely blank, until I woke up about 5.5 hours later in a hotel bed next to someone I'd never seen before. And I knew something was wrong. I mean, I'd never felt like that before. And I'd certainly never woken up next to somebody I'd never met. And the police were called immediately, and I thought I did everything right. But for whatever reason, the police didn't believe me. They didn't prioritize the case, and I was left without a path forward. So when I stood up on the Speaker Express stage in October of 2017, it was to talk about this experience, what had happened to me, and how I wanted to crowdfund the private prosecution of my rapist. Because that's something we can do here. You can play the part of the prosecutor. You can, as an individual person, decide to go try somebody in a criminal court and potentially put them in jail. It's a weird quirk of the UK, and it's fantastic. From there, from standing up on that stage, like I said, I've only not been in The Guardian. I was on the front page of the Evening Standard. I was in a 2-page spread of the Daily Mail. I was on ITV's This Morning and Victoria Derbyshire simultaneously, which I'm told is really tricky. So they both got my exclusive at the same time. Who knew? And it was insane. It was absolutely insane. It was a week of wall-to-wall media. And it was amazing, but it's also led to a lot more. Actually, people are still following my story. So this past autumn, when I had an update, I was in The Sun, I was in the radio, doing all sorts of things as well. And I've also become a TV commentator. So instead of just talking about my story, the last time I was on Victoria Derbyshire, I was talking about basically rape in the public eye and what people think about and talk about when it comes to rape and violence against women. And I'm also now a paid speaker, which is very exciting. So this past autumn, I was asked to speak at the Women's Equality Party conference, amongst other things. So I speak on things like human rights, issues around violence against women, but I also speak about my work stuff. So I'm a data storyteller. I talk about brand, I talk about strategy, I talk about marketing. I wear a lot of different hats, and when I'm on a stage, it really depends what I'm talking about, depending on the hat that I'm wearing. Oh, that did not work out well. Okay. So I was recently at a protest, Million Women Rise. Entertainingly, a friend of mine and I arrived a bit late and we got shoved in the front, which is kind of bizarre. So all the pictures are of me standing there. I'm looking at my phone, I'm texting a friend, and that was in the newspaper. So it's all very exciting. But what I think is really important here is that when you're trying to change the world, when you want to do something, it's really hard to stick out from the crowd. There's so many issues today. There's so much going wrong in the world. And we all have our own point of view on what we could do, or what we should do, or what other people could do, right? But there's so many issues. So how do you figure out what you can really embody, what you can make a difference with, what you can change the world with? And for me, I think I always wanted to change the world, but the world was just too big. I had too many different things I could do. And when this happened to me, it sort of narrowed my worldview substantially. All of a sudden, this was the one thing I wanted. I wanted desperately to make it that bringing people to justice for sexual violence could actually happen. We have abysmal prosecution rates in this country. So this became what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. But that doesn't mean that it has to be your thing. You probably have your own thing that you think is important. You probably have your own point of view on what we need to do on this planet with the many 7.8 billion at this point? There's a lot of us. There's a lot of problems. But we can change it. And that's what I think is the coolest bit. So think about this. What would happen if you didn't think it was unusual to try and change the world? That's my daughter. I showed this picture to a friend earlier who used to work in Parliament, and he immediately said, "What's your daughter doing sitting in the gallery of the Commons?" That's my daughter sitting in the gallery of the Commons. Well, the MPs are talking about me, okay? My daughter, after this, went and lobbied our MP about a law that she wants changed that has nothing to do with my stuff. Then she lobbied another MP, the deputy leader of the Lib Dems. Then she wrote a letter to our MP. Then this went up to the Ministry of Justice. Now my daughter is getting letters from the Commons. So this envelope comes, and I'm assuming it's for me and my campaign, and I grab it, it's the House of Commons, and I go to open it, and it says her name on it. It's just like, what is this? When I was her age, I was writing to the president to ask if he liked black jelly beans, and my child is trying to change the world. But actually, Think about how much it's been kind of beaten out of us. This idea that we could change it, this idea that people could have to listen to us, that we could have meaning, that we could say something, that people would have to listen if we spoke in the right way. So you just have to remember. You have to forget, actually. Remember, you have to forget that change is hard. So if you wanted to crowdfund, and there are a lot of reasons you would want to crowdfund. So if you have an idea, if you have a charity idea, if you have a social justice idea, even if you have a social enterprise idea, fundamentally, you will be judged by how much money you have to put behind your idea. Much like in business, much as in entrepreneurship, it does come down to the money. So if there's something you want to do to change the world, you have to be serious about trying to raise the money to have impact. Whether that impact is lobbying, advertising, Facebook ads, putting on events, whatever it is completely worth thinking about raising money. And for me, it all starts with one thing: authenticity. Why this? Why this one thing that you want to raise money for? We talked about the world being so big. How do you pick just one thing? Why this one thing? And you've got to feel it in your gut. You've got to be able to talk about it. It's got to give you fire, because it becomes your life. And if you don't have that fire, it is not worth the time and the effort it will take. Because I can tell you, raising the 27,000 pounds that I did absolutely took over my life. Being in the media for a week and a half at a go at different points in my case took over my life. So you have to believe it. It has to be real. And it has to be deep, deep inside of you for it to be worth doing it. But if authentically you can say, actually, this cause, this idea, this thing is so important to me that I am willing to put aside my free time, my sanity, then it's up to the next one, which is relevance. Why now? So for me, I went up on that stage in October of 2017, and it was the midst of Me Too starting. So there were all of these conversations about what had been acceptable, the sorts of behaviors that women had put up with or that people had thought was okay. There started to be a real conversation and real openness and it was just this real moment. And for me, I felt open to being able to have those conversations, being able to talk about it, because all of a sudden, the entire demeanor of the conversation changed. People were more open to hearing it. So if you have a cause or an idea, you need to pick your moment. Now, marketing hat me says very, very importantly that actually what matters even more than relevance is how you position your cause or your idea. So for me, my moment was Me Too, but mine wasn't just another Me Too story. I wasn't standing on stage saying, this happened to me and it's terrible. I mean, it was, and I could have, and there would have been power in that too. But what I wanted was something more, right? So how did I position it? Well, not quite the same, not just another story. I want to change things. I want to bring a private prosecution. I want to make this the way we do things. I want other women to be able to do this. I don't want it to be that anybody else has to waive their anonymity, tell their story, stand on a stage and bare their soul and be that vulnerable just for justice. That's my position, right? Women's rights are human rights. There's no political point. There's no one side that I'm on or the other. I'm nonpartisan. So I positioned myself adjacent to Me Too, being in that moment, but also having a step forward on what the other stories were. And that's what made my story different. That's what made it that the press covered me, fundamentally. That's what made it that people supported me. So it made it that people contacted me from all over the world to tell me their story, whether it was their own similar story or the story of a friend or a family member who'd gone through something similar. I became the every woman, the this could happen to anyone version of this story. And sometimes that's what's needed. And that's where my position was, and that's why my position was so different, and that made it possible for me to fundraise in a way that others hadn't. Which brings me on to a couple of very important things. I mentioned earlier giving up your free time and your sanity. Without a tribe, I would not do this. And for me, that tribe was the Speaker Express WhatsApp group in my pocket. A Speaker Express member came and did my makeup before my first BBC interview, because they do not do makeup for you. Everybody else does, but BBC less so, which is really scary when it's your first TV appearance. I had people telling me what they thought about the outfit I was going to wear. Just lots of encouragement, lots of help, and I couldn't have done it without them. And then since then, I've met lots of other people who've been through things similar to what I've been through, and my tribe, my group of people who are trying to change the world, similar to me, has grown, and it's been fantastic. And I do feel like I can do it. I can do something. I can affect a massive amount of change. And at the end of it, really, if you can't harness social and traditional media, it's going to be very, very difficult to do crowdfunding or any kind of public fundraising. You need to be telling your story in a way that other people are willing to tell it as well, that other people are willing to tell your story, able to move you along, able to bring you up, able to highlight you. Because as individuals, we're somewhat powerless. But it's when we come together into that crowd, into that tribe, that we can really have proper change. Funny last story. So I did all this stuff. I did all this press. People were asking me about everything good and bad in my life. There were trolls. People commented about the fact that, goodness gracious, I was drinking with my father when I was drugged. Goodness. Ooh, could imagine drinking, the horror. And through all of this, I got this giant 2-page spread in the Daily Mail, and I'm reading through it, and it's like all this great stuff. And then in the middle of this paragraph where they're like talking about my great campaign, this woman writes, "Emily would no sooner lie about rape than hack off her glorious thick red hair." What? What do these things have to do with anything? Also, it's not actually red, it's dyed. And they completely wrapped up my credibility with my hair. That's insane. But that's the thing, when you're crowdfunding, when you're in public, people kind of get to assign different things to you. And if you're going to go public, if you're going to crowdfund, those people start to have a bit of a right on you. And you have to be prepared for that. Because while it's a funny story now, there was some yelling when I first read it. So if you need to know more about me, my website is emilyinpublic.com. You can email me for bookings for whatever at bookings@emilyinpublic.com. I do crowdfunding strategy one-to-ones, media, social media, influencer training. I will be the first to say I am an Instagram influencer. I have no idea why, but apparently I give good advice on it. I'm also doing another crowdfunding workshop in late April, so if you want to drop me an email, I can send you information when I have it. And then follow me on Twitter and Instagram. And I think I'm exactly in on time, so there's no time for questions, but you guys can find me afterwards if you like. Oh, I can do a couple of questions. All right, does anybody have any questions? What are your questions? None? None whatsoever. Okay.
Maybe they're all just so enthralled by what you just told them that it's a bit constant.
Nothing. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. Oh, we do have a question. Go ahead.
What gave you the strength to go through all this?
What gave me the strength to do this? This is going to sound like an advert, and it's not. But I went on the Speaker Express 2-day signature training, and I did it because I was trying to start and grow a business. And partway through, after the first day, I sent Anik an email, and I was like, look, I know I've been talking about my business, but this structure has really given me this idea that I want to talk about wanting to crowdfund to privately prosecute my rapist. And we sort of talked about it a bit because I was worried that it would make other people uncomfortable. And then I got the structure from that, and very much the Speaker Express people absolutely were my rock going through it, and I absolutely couldn't have done it without them. So, like I said, it sounds like an advert, but it's all true. All right, is that it? Fantastic. Come find me afterwards if you have any other questions. Thank you very much.